Symptoms by design. When to use what symptom? Let's assume that the body is really awesome in what it's doing. And there's a logic to the madness. The body adapts to every situation it needs to, which we did with the metaphor with the marathon runner, right? It adapts to running, it adapts to repairing, and the symptom, in this case of tiredness or whatever, is actually an adaptation response to the situation that was going on. Like we have the symptom of so wrinkly hands, which is an adaptation to water. We have a symptom of higher adrenaline levels, which is an adaptation to running. And we had a symptom of being tired, which is an adaptation to running, to repairing after the running. The adaptation is really important concept in BioCompass because the body adapts to the situation in a way that it needs to adapt to. So like going to the gym and building your muscles. At first you have small tiny muscle ruptures and then the muscles start repairing. And if you do not adapt, the body cannot cope with the same situation the next time. Or even worse, if you don't adapt to the situation, you eventually die. Because either a predator eats you or you've been eaten by a predator. So one of the key issues in BioCompass, which also makes it a beautiful system, is the actual adaptation response. So let's look at the two phases again. We have at number 1, it's the normal day and night rhythm. Red is a little bit more active, blue is a little bit more relaxing. So during the days you have a little bit more active states and you have more relaxing states. Some are higher, some are more deeper. Then something happens at number 2. This is the stress moment, the Yudin moment. And we're going to get there in a little while. It's the Yudin moment that activates your sympathetic nervous system so you become more energetic to deal with the situation. So to start running away, to fight back, to process food better, whatever is needed to adapt to the situation so you can deal with it. So number 2 is the actually stressor, the stressing event. Number 3 is the period at which you start adapting or at which you're adapting. So during the entire period, you still need to run away from the predator and you're still continuing to adapt to the situation. So your adrenaline level is higher, your sleep is worse, your digestion is down. And finally, at number 4, whenever that is, the threat is gone. The threat is gone and your body can start going back to normal. So number 4 is the release moment, the sigh moment, the aha moment. When I no longer have to fight, the threat is gone, I'm safe. That's the finish line in a marathon, the metaphor. Then you get into the number 5. And the period number 5 is the restoration. The time that your body needs to undo the adaptation process, to undo what happened in number 3. So the restoration period, the number 5, is, in the case of marathon running, a rebuilding of your muscles, rebuilding of your nutritional levels, rebuilding of your energy. So it's actually the opposite of number 3. And for a ballpark, you can look at number 3 and number 5 at the same length at a ballpark. So let's take a look at the adaptation process a little bit more in depth. I call it an EMAP, an evolutionary, meaningful adaptation process. It's evolutionary meaningful for the entire organism, for the entire body to adapt to the situation. And it's a process. It's both the adaptation to the stressor and the readaptation to normality, to normal normal living. Every EMAP has two phases, the red phase and the blue phase, the adaptation phase and the restoration phase. If there is a release, if there is a number 4, some stressors last for 40, 50, 60 years. People are constantly in stress, or this might happen again, or what did I do in the past, or I need to be running, or whatever. So if there is a number 4, if there is a release moment, then there's also a blue phase, a readaptation or regeneration phase. So now let's take a look at the whole model, which is a little bit more complex. Basically, you see a red area and a blue area. Basically, it's still the same. Let's start from the beginning. At number 1, there's a normal day and night rhythm. A little bit activated, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more active, a little bit more stressed, a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more at peace. Also, the technical terms are for the more active phases, sympathetic tone or sympathetic nervous system, and for the more relaxing phase, a vagatone or parasympathetic nervous system. So while you run through the day and suddenly something happens, something triggers you. Either it's a real new trauma or it's a triggering remembering of an old trauma. And that starts the entire EMAP process. The trigger consists of a visual image, auditory memory, feeling, kinesthetic, olfactory, and gustatory, smelling and tasting. Or self-talk, something you say to yourself. It's the trigger or the stress event is composed, and we'll get back to that, it's composed of these elements. And then the active phase starts, the adaptation phase starts. Number 3, it lasts for as long as it lasts. And it stops only when you experience a shift moment, a relief moment, a sigh moment. Like, everything is solved now. Now everything is okay. Also, the shift moment is a split second in time. And remember, this does not have to be that you're safe, but it can be the realization that you're safe. It's the evidence procedure that number 2 is gone. Take, for example, losing a job. Number 2 is your boss tells you you're going to lose your job. You're fully in stress. What am I going to do? Where do I find my income? Where will I be working? How will I take care of the children, etc.? That's during the active phase, during the adaptation phase. Then you find a new job. You go into the interview and they say you're hired. Is that your shift moment? Or is your shift moment, your relief moment, your first day at work? Or is your shift moment the first paycheck you get? Or is your first shift moment the first company meeting you go to? So the actually realization that the trigger or the stressor is gone can be totally different for different people and different situations. But the most important thing to remember is the feeling behind it. It's like, now everything is okay. And one of the mistakes a lot of people make is that they assume that as soon as a person, in this case, signs the work agreement, they experience a shift moment. It can be a week later, it can be a day later, it can be in the car driving back home and calling their friend that they have a new job. So the actual shift moment can be totally different for different situations. But after you have experienced that and the stressor is gone, you enter into a restoration phase. In the restoration phase, your body starts kind of deconstructing what was going on in the active phase. And what happens exactly on a biological level depends on what happened in the active phase on a biological level. And we're working towards that. But most important thing to remember for now is during the restoration phase, the body starts decomposing or rebuilding the tissues that have been affected or changed in the adaptation phase. Readaptation back to normality. That's something you can call it. At the end of the healing and at the end of the restoration phase, there's the start of the healing crisis. HC stands for a healing crisis. What a healing crisis does is right in the middle of the entire blue phase, right in the middle, there's a shift of energy. It's almost like, imagine driving a car and you need to back up. You're driving forward and then you need to decide, I need to back up for a parking place. At first you need to stop the car, then you need to revert the direction, put it in reverse, and then you can give gas again to pull back. The healing crisis is something similar. What it does is it helps the body to move from a readaptation, so decomposing or deconstructing whatever happened in the active phase, and change the energy to build into normalization phase, to clean up what has been done and to go back to normal situations. The normalization phase is usually without symptoms. It's like cleaning up some stuff and finishing up. In any project where you do something and you start rebuilding, at the end of the project you need to clean up your working table, right? Or you need to clean up your space. That's kind of the normalization phase. At the end, the normalization phase ends at a certain point. Kind of depends on situation, but usually normalization phase doesn't have any symptoms. And at the end of the normalization phase, everything is pretty much back to normal like it was before. The length of this process all depends actually on the length of the activation phase or of the adaptation phase. And even though this is a one-time, a single process, you can have multiple processes running at the same time. But focus on one process. On one process first. So this is the main image. This image is also in your downloads, so you can download and work with that.
Now continue and just hit the subscribe button so you'll never miss any valuable content.